Welcome to People Unplugged, the podcast from the creative team at People Unboxed. I'm Westy, Digital Director at People Unboxed. This is the People Unplugged podcast. Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. This month, I'm really pleased to say that published author Graham Thomas from TheNeverPress joins me on the show. Graham, novelist, photographer, film producer, podcaster. I could go on and on. There's probably just so much to discuss. I'm dying to get into this conversation. So firstly, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon, Westy. I am very well, thank you very much. And thank you so much for inviting me onto this podcast. I'm really happy to be here. It's a lovely way to end the week. I've been looking forward to it all week, and here we are.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Well, hopefully it won't disappoint you. Very much a headline introduction there. And I'm sure I've just scratched on the surface of what you do. You do so much. So perhaps you can take us through that sort of potted history, that journey you've been on to get to where you are today and what it is you're doing.
Sure. Well, I've always been a kind of creative person, I guess. When I was a young boy, my old man was a builder. And one of my favourite toys, I guess, was lining paper. He used to do lots of wallpapering, and he'd always just give me a roll of lining paper. And that was one of the things that really filled me with a lot of joy. I would unroll that paper and just draw and write and doodle and just unroll it and unroll it and unroll it. And it's like 12 meters of paper. And in the end, I would have all these strange mosaics. So I was always, my brother's very sporty. He's very outdoorsy. I was the indoors kind of child. So I've always just been fascinated with my own imagination and the stories and writing. And that over time just kind of led me, consciously or not, into the creative practices. So I studied film at university. I went to film school briefly, and then just started making movies, got into the corporate sphere, worked with lots of huge clients in the engineering world, some tech firms, some startups, all across the board in the corporate sphere, making thousands of movies, short films, content. And then on the side of that, just writing. And about 12 years ago, I wrote my first novel just to see if I could write a novel. And at that time, there was an explosion in self-publishing, in the self-publishing world, not just for digital things like ebooks, but also supply chains, just the supply chains economics of being able to publish your own paperback and have it printed on demand, and then delivered to someone, just one single book, rather than an inventory of 1,000 in a warehouse, how it used to be. Just opened up the world for writers like me. And so therefore I thought, great, these things that I'm writing don't have to sit in my desk drawer. I can get them out into the world. So I founded a publishing company called TheNeverPress, which was basically used to house my own IP, house my own books. And over time, it's grown and developed. And now it's at a point where we are pivoting it. I say we because it's not just me anymore. There's loads of creatives involved, and we're pivoting it into becoming a full-scale production house, or full-scale publishers, taking on other writers, finding new voices, finding those artists that may have slipped in between the cracks, and championing those voices. And it's all kind of led all the way back from just a little boy in a kitchen with a roll of lining paper, just writing. And sad to say, about 40 years later, here we are. I'd like to say 27 years later, but I'm afraid time marches on, and yeah, here we are.
Fantastic. Love that. And I love the arty background. I mean, just completely by the by, I did A-level art and then went on to art critic graphic design. So I'm similar to yourself in that I'm always got a pencil in my hand. I'm all about sketching and arts, and I have two daughters, and they couldn't be further apart in terms of subjects that they're interested in. But my youngest daughter is photography, art. She's very much me, and my oldest daughter is very much like my wife. She's into very much the sciences and all of it. Cool. It's just bizarre how these two worlds come together. So if I've got this right, and correct me if I'm not, your novels in particular are something called Magical Realism. So I'll be honest with you, I had to go on to Gemini and almost explain this to me. And it says it's imagine a story that feels like real life but sprinkled with magic. Is that nice? Is that about right? So tell me through what it means.
That's pretty fair. Yes, it's not. I mean, when you say magical realism to people, because of the magical part of it, naturally people think about, I don't know, Harry Potter or goblins or ghouls and stuff like that. It's not that. In fact, it's stories that are set in the everyday world, in this reality, in this plane of existence. And the things that happen within them are strange and askew and magical, but they're not necessarily things that are based in any kind of fantastical things that could never happen. There's no monsters or ghouls or goblins
Yes.
or magic systems. In fact, the strange and mystical things that do happen, or the supernatural things that do happen, aren't really explained. They're just part of life's rich tapestry. So if I were to give you an example, I guess, even though it's not a book, I always use the film like Inception, the movie, or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. That would be a really good example of magical realism. It's a film inherently about these two people, these two relationships. It's very, very much based on their real, relatable, real world relationship. However, they have this ability to go inside each other's minds and erase their memories from each other. The technology required to do this is never really explained. Like in Inception, the technology required to go into someone's dream is never explained. You don't need to know about it. It just happens. And the themes of magical realism tend to revolve around, time, dream, memory, space, and how we fit into that, and these weird and wonderful occurrences that happen within the world of the characters that are strange, but they are not, magical in the sense of fantasy.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
I'm so pleased you said Inception, because as I was reading the description, that's exactly the sort of thing that came in. Yeah, 100%. It's exactly what came into my head. So, although officially this would be an L&D podcast, I think in the conversations we've had already, I'd love to explore how my world and your world collide. Sure. And more importantly, I think what we could probably learn from each other. So it's obviously going to be a two-way chat, which is fantastic. So couldn't you start by perhaps explaining how do you go about writing a novel? Because in my head, that's got to be the biggest project plan ever. So where does it start? Do you write in sections and say, I'm going to write this bit, we'll join it all together later? Or do you always start at the beginning of a story? And so take me through how that actually works.
Well, you're right in that it is an incredible undertaking project-wise, and similarly to any kind of industry or any project-based sprint, I guess, everything has got many, many moving parts, and each one complements another, but also fights against another for attention. And it is a juggling act for the project manager or the writer or whomever to activate the right things at the right time, to make sure that everything's been serviced in the right way, and it's all leading towards an end game. And the end game being a finished manuscript, or if we're talking creatively, the end game being the end of the book or the climax or whatever needs to happen. Each one of these books for a writer, everyone has their own. The great thing about writing is there's no set way of doing it to a degree. Creatively, people find their own way of how to write. Some people like to write, say, 500 words a day. Others, 4,000. Or it might be that they don't write at all, and then on Fridays, in the evening when the kids are asleep or whatever it is, that's their time, and they just carve out that time. Other people just as and when. So it's all really down to the individual, and it takes a while to find that groove, find that kind of style for yourself that works well. Personally, when I'm in the flow, when I started a project in earnest, I like to write between 2,000 and 4,000 words a day, which is usually about a chapter. I like to break I break everything down into component parts, because if you just say I'm going to write a novel, that is a huge mountain to climb, and it can be insurmountable, because there is so not just the technical requirements. There's the time, the solitude, the just the thinking time all day, every day, thinking about it, plus serving the story, the narrative, thinking about the audience. It's a lot going on. There is a lot going on. But you break it down, like many things, into component parts. You set your project plan out. You have your story Bible, which, the story Bible being like the characters that are in it, what they're all about, what they want and what they need, which are obviously two different things.
Yes.
The world that it exists in, all these things, all this behind the scenes R&D stuff that you do. The writing itself is kind of like going to market for a small business, I guess. All the R&D that happens behind the scenes takes so much effort and work and thinking about. I find that the actual writing itself is, it's not necessarily the doing. It's like always the executing of everything that you thought,
Right.
everything that you've planned. It's a big old project, but it's incredibly rewarding. It's frustrating that you wouldn't believe, but the elation that I get, particularly when something works, or you just reached a point, I guess, like a flow state. I guess I have no real memory. When I read back my old stuff, I don't remember writing it, which sounds like I've definitely plagiarized someone or used an AI. That's not the case.
Well, we might come to AI later.
But you get into a flow state, similar, going back to Inception, with the point in dreaming, where you perceive the dream and you create the dream at the same time. And the flow state in writing that I get into is very similar. Like I envisioning it, even though I can't say the word, and also I'm creating it and typing it out at the same time. And
it's fascinating how, as you're describing that, I'm thinking our worlds are so similar. So if I'm writing a piece of e-learning, if I'm designing a leadership course, for example, I don't just open PowerPoint and think, right, where am I going? Slide 1. I need everything planned out. I need to know what they want the outcomes to be. I need to know who the audience are. I need to, and all of that stuff up front. You're right. The actual writing it at the end is actually quite straightforward.
Yeah.
And the same with the piece of e-learning. I don't just start up a piece of software and say, right, here we go. What am I doing on slide 1, and not have a clue where any of that's going.
Yeah. It's difficult.
The difference, I think, for me though, is that I probably know that this client has said, and we want this session to be 6 hours long. Or in a piece of e-learning, for example, we tend to not go over 20, 25 minutes, maybe half an hour at a push, because it gets really dull if you do. But how do you know how long the book's going to be? Is that a conscious decision, or is it going to be a short story, or is it going to be War and Peace? I mean, literally.
Yes, I mean that is a tricky one. I like that. I like that decision. I instinctively know to a degree when I think about, okay, this is going to be a book, and it's probably. Well, it's just the way I work. I can't speak for any other writers.
Sure.
I have this weird thing about word count. So I think of a story, I think of an idea, and I go, okay, that's 75,000 words. That doesn't need to be any more than 75,000 words. Or, I can probably push. I think I can. The nice way of doing it is like, if I really try, I can get it in under a certain amount, because no one wants to watch a film that's 3 hours long when the film should be 2 hours long. But I've got a good gauge about how long things should be. You kind of know when you've outstayed your welcome, I guess. At university, I studied screenwriting for a module, and a really great piece of advice that the lecturer gave me, and I think it's quite relatable to a lot of things, especially anything where you're presenting stuff to someone. And it's really specifically relevant to screenwriting. And that is, when you're writing a scene, get in late and leave early. Now, what that means is, if you think of a film in a scene in a movie where they're having coffee, you don't see them arrive at the coffee shop, order the coffee, drink the coffee, they're paying for the coffee as they're leaving. And that's the end. That's the scene, right? You've got into the scene. You don't have all this preamble. You get to the crux of the point, and then you're done. So because I studied film, and film naturally is very kind of edited and concise, because it's expensive to shoot film. When it comes to long form writing, I have that mentality, so I can be pacey, I can be quick, and I can get in late, and I can leave early. And I think that relates a lot to, like you were saying with e-learning, after 25 minutes, after 30 minutes, you can tell that people are tuning out. You can tell that you might have lost them. And you know that, okay, by the 10th minute, I've got them. This is like the 20, for example, I don't know if this is true, but like between the 10 and 17 minutes, that is peak learning. I can hit them with complex issues because I've set it up. They're going to be receptive, and then I can wind down. It's all a narrative arc, right?
100% what you described there. If you think about the start of it is, tell them what you're going to tell them why it matters, tell them why they care, why do they need to know. And then you're right, at that point, they're warmed up to this idea of, okay, now I'm receptive to this, now tell me. And then obviously in our world, you then follow that up at the end by, telling them what you've told them, really. Exactly that. Exactly. It's exactly that. Tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them. And that sounds simple, but that is pretty much the way it works. You need to warm them up to it first.
It's tricky though, because like you're saying, you have to know your audience, but the tendency when you're a subject matter expert such as yourself the tendency is to want to tell them everything or give them everything.
Yes.
I'm such a have this, and really you're just overwhelming them, and you cannibalize your own content because nothing's landing. If you naturally have to find a rhythm and find like the right piece of information to deliver to them at the right time, let the joke sit or let the content sit, move on to the next one, and getting that judgment right is very tricky.
It's interesting you said there, obviously we know who the audience are. To a certain extent, I do. Is that the same for you? Do you, if it's not bizarre, and it is going to sound like a bizarre question, but so ask me to clarify if you need me to. Do you write for you, or do you write with an audience in mind?
That's a very good question. And I personally, I write for myself, chiefly because I don't have an audience. But I'm sure if I did have an audience, I'd write for them.
You do, but you don't know who they are,
yes,
right?
That's true. I think I've worked very hard to protect the creative world in which I'm writing, because that's where the author's voice exists. That's where I can push boundaries. I can test myself. I can test form and theory. I can be wild within that. And I like that. And I think that means the work comes across as authentic and it has some meaning. It's relatable to someone out there. If you decide actually from the get-go, I'm writing this piece of work to appeal to this demographic, to this specific audience, for me, that feels like you're hampering yourself. You're diluting your creative freedom and expression because you're making something for them. It doesn't feel real to me. I would much rather, and this is because I don't have too much of an audience, I'd much rather be wild and free and find those people who love them. I think if I became incredibly successful, there would probably be a whole raft of new problems and questions and pressures from marketers, pressures from booksellers to write something that was as successful as the thing before. Think about this demographic, think about that. And at that point, it kind of kills the joy.
Yes.
Having said that, when I do start a project, I'm always thinking about not necessarily what the audience want, but I do think about their attention, and I do think about making it a pleasurable experience for them. That's not to say that all my books are comedies. Some of them are quite dark or broody. What I mean about the enjoyment is that they're getting the story, they're getting sucked into the world, they want to be there, they want to stay there, and at the end of this journey, they've felt however it is I've hoped that they've felt, however it is that the art has been constructed in order to elicit that feeling. And so that is what I have in mind. I want them to kind of come along on this journey and hit these emotional beats here and there. That's about the level of it. I don't really think about demographics. I don't think about targets. I don't think about anything from a monetary or a marketing perspective. Yeah. That was a long rant. Sorry.
No, absolutely not. And you know, no, not at all. And as you were explaining that, what jumped into my head, it's so as I said, I did A-levels, but my real thing, my real passion, like you drawing on your long pieces of lining paper, I was very arty, and art was where I could see myself going.
Yeah.
And I'm often asked that question now: but if that was your background and that's what your passion was, that's what you love doing, why don't you do that for a living? And as bizarre as this sounds, it's because I didn't want someone to tell me what to draw or what to do or what it should look like. I was doing that almost because it was my passion. Versus someone's now paying me to do it. It just feels so different to me. Does that make any sense?
100%. I mean, I don't know. Is that the difference between like hobby and art? I don't know where that line is, because you just do this because you love it and it gives you rich fulfillment. And who cares if, it doesn't need to be for anybody else. It can just be for you. And that's beautiful and precious. It's just yours. This is my safe time. Like in my, outside of writing, I love model making, Lego, because I don't have much room for paints and stuff, or Partworks kits. And that's
the Lego.
Yes, you've got a little BB-8 there behind you. I won't turn my camera around because I'm like living in a back cave of the Lego. It's crazy. But that's like your art. That's just for me. It's almost it's a Zen practice. Just getting into this meditative. It's a great way to just calm and focus on one task, one project, one little thing that has no bearing or relevance on anyone else, doesn't affect anyone else in the world. No one's telling me to build this or build that. It's just for me. And I think that's so precious. And a lot of these things get taken away from us as we grow up. A lot of these things you don't find the time for it, or we're told by other people that it's juvenile, for example, or that it's for children, or whatever it is. But if you can find that and keep it, whatever it is that gives you that childlike wonder or joy, then protect it. My friend always says that he loves painting little miniature figures, and he says he loves doing things. He loves doing things that when he catches himself in the mirror, he's got his tongue out. You know, like,
I get
you know
that.
what I mean?
I
Like,
absolutely get that. Yeah,
he's so focused on what he's doing that
that's me drawing.
yeah, you've got your tongue out and you're
Yeah.
just into it like a little child. It's great. So you should, I think everyone should at least rediscover, if they've lost it or misplaced it, that kind of that joy of something that is just theirs, especially if it's a creative thing. It's just theirs, no one else's.
So you've had an idea for a book. You know where it's going. You in your head it's however many thousand words, like you say. You've got that broken in. Have you ever been in a position where you've started that and it's just not going as you think it would? And then how do you make that choice to say, actually, you know what, I'm scrapping this? Because there must be so much work invested to get to that point. And I'm not going to say flogging a dead horse, but you do know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean. And no, it's right. I think it took me a long time to realise that, I mean, I'd started for a long while before I wrote my first novel. And then once I wrote my first novel, I realised, or I thought, I've cracked it now. And so from now on in, everything's going to be the same. Like the process is going to be the same. And it was the same for 10 further novels, for example. Like I would start it and I'd finish it like I was running a marathon non-stop. And obviously when you run a marathon, you train for it and you don't want to stop, unless obviously your knees blow out. You don't want to stop. It might be horrible. You might slow down. You might speed up. You might hate yourself. You might question why you've done this, but you don't stop and you get to the end. And I equated that with writing long form fiction. And then something happened. I wouldn't say it's writer's block or anything, but some of the joy was gone. I think I was putting undue pressure or the wrong types of pressure onto myself in one of my manuscripts. And I just wasn't feeling it. It wasn't right. And if it's not right for me, then it's definitely not going to be right for the readers. They'll be able to spot someone phoning it in. I'm sure when you're delivering your training, you must have that fear that you've got to be on, because they'll be able to spot me, whether that's, imposter syndrome, as people call it, that they think you're a fraud, or they just might not think that you've got the energy. You fear that kind of, I've got to be on. And so, but then I realized when I did stop this manuscript and I failed to complete a few others, I realized that it was okay. It's totally fine, because I started to repurpose stuff. I started to move things around, take ideas from unfinished things and put them in something else. And voila, we've got something completely different that you'd never have expected. I wouldn't have come up with that before if I hadn't gone down this route. So I think pushing on through something when you know it's not working, what do they call it? The sunk cost fallacy? Is it something like that?
Yeah. How do you know when to just say, do you know what, let's just cut our losses and ditch this?
Yeah, it's very difficult to learn. It's kind of instinctual, and I don't get it right all the time, because sometimes you should push on through. It is just a little hurdle, which might feel like a mountain, but you should push on through, because then you have a breakthrough and you keep on going and it's incredible. But sometimes, actually, let's stop, let's pivot. Don't think about how much you've invested, because that's going to force you to do probably too many bad decisions. You've got to think about holistically, I think. Why are you doing this? What's the end game? What are you looking at? Like, take a helicopter view of what's going on. Is it worth continuing? What if I stop? What if I take a break? What if I refocus and go over here and think about that? And so that's how I started to do a new phase of my writing, where I wouldn't commit completely to start and finish and bang it through in one marathon stint. I just go, see what happens, have a look at the landscape, stop if you need to, replot, refocus, work on something else. And it's been quite successful for me. I've started writing lots of different styles and genres and content, like short stories or poetry or copywriting, just because it's a new way to kind of think about things in a different way. So, but going back to the point of knowing when to stop, I think it's instinctual, but it's really difficult. And I don't know if there's a hard and fast rule where you have to apply the same logic to every time you come up against these barriers.
Yeah, I mean, for me as well, in some ways it's a bit of a mindset shift as well. So rather than just saying this doesn't work, maybe that doesn't mean it's the wrong thing. Maybe
No,
it's
not
just
at
the
all.
wrong thing at this time. So
Yes.
it doesn't work for me right now. So it's exactly as you just said. There might be, we'd write a part for a course and we're looking at it and think, no, it just doesn't fit. Well, that's just not deleted and gone forever, because it might not be the right fit for this course right now for this
Yeah.
audience. But let's park it for now, and then we can potentially bring. And the amount of times we've done that, we thought, oh, do you remember we thought about that activity that we wrote we never used? Well, actually, that might be a good fit here. So I think sometimes it is that if you take that mindset approach to it, it's then saying it's not wasted time. It might not be right for now, but it's not wasted time. And I try to look at it in that way. It's always sort of on the back burner. It may never come back to the forefront, but you know what? It's sort of there. But it may, yeah, absolutely.
And then going on from that, if you do stick at the thing and keep on going when you should have refocused, and you go on and you come to the end and you've done it and you're happy that you've done it, but then you look back on it and you think, oh, I don't love what I've just done there.
Yeah.
And that is kind of the waste of time. And you've wasted so much extra time that you didn't need to, just because of the arrogance of pushing through to complete the marathon or whatever it is. When if you'd have refocused, you would have had something that would have paid off in dividends in 5 years' time or 2 projects' time or whatever it was. So it's difficult to. It is difficult. It's instinctual. You want to protect your babies and see them through to the finish, but sometimes you do have to throw the eggs out of the nest.
How you're spinning so many plates, Graham. You really are. So how do you manage that? How do you say, look, I'm working on this thing. Obviously you've got ideas. You must have so many things going on that. How do you decide? Yes, I want to do this thing, but I need to finish this one first. How do you prioritise your time?
Oh, that is tricky.
Or is that a problem you have? Even I don't know.
I mean, no, that definitely is. I'm fortunate enough that I have a full-time job, which is not the publishing. I have a full-time job in a video production company, which takes up quite a lot of time. So that time's theirs. That time is ours for this company, and I really believe in it. And I love the job that I have. I have to say that in case the boss is listening. But that then, and then obviously I have to.
Don't kid yourself. We're going to get listeners.
We will do now. And then therefore, then I have to sleep, I have to eat, I have to exercise. So now I'm down to X amount of hours. Okay, so in those hours, I need to maximize my time. I really need to not slack off or just think, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, because I hold myself accountable. If these things need to get done, no one else is going to do them. Especially with anything creative, or creative writing for me, the idea for the book or the short story or whatever it is, it has to come out. It has to. I've thought about it now, and therefore I have to write it, and that takes time. That means it's got to happen somehow. I've got to find the time. I'm not sure how appropriate this analogy is, thinking back to it, but a friend of mine said that writing is a bit like having an affair. Not that I would encourage anyone to have an affair, in that when people have an affair, they always find the time to have the affair. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah,
they always find half hour here or an hour there, or stop off for a drink on the way home, whatever it is, because it's this private illicit passion. Now I'm equating something quite horrible to this process
to writing it. I get the analogy.
If you do need to do it and it is a compulsion, it's your love, whatever, you probably will find the time. Like an hour of really effective work is better than 3 hours of half-assing it around and like this and that. So I'm pretty good at focusing in small bursts, which is helpful because I've got a lot of things to focus on, many things that require small bursts of absolute concentration. I can't really do too much, I can't focus on one thing for more than an hour or 2 hours. Something else.
Well, evidently multitasking is not good anyway, because I mean, we say we do it, but we just don't do anything particularly well. I've been reading a lovely book by a guy called Mark Zell Sanders. It's all about time boxing, and the idea is that actually we say we multitask, but we just do everything fairly badly, whereas he's all about, no, I'm doing this for 45 minutes now and I'm doing that bit for an hour later, and that in my world that makes a lot of sense. I absolutely get that.
That's how I work.
Just got a couple more for you, if it's okay with you. I'm just thinking again, when I'm writing a piece of content for a client, for example, writing that for face-to-face delivery versus writing that for maybe someone delivering virtually. Certainly, if it's going to be learner-led and they're doing it as e-learning, that isn't the same thing at all. My approach that would be totally different. So when I say book or you say novel, I think most people are thinking of a physical book, but I personally consume books via audio, for example. So I have a load of audiobooks in the car. People have Kindles. Does that change your approach to how you write a book?
No. I think it changes the delivery vehicle, and therefore offers up a lot of great opportunities. The content is the same. It's a novel. The story is the same, no matter how you access it. But the ways in which you access it change, and therefore you can do lots of cool things. So with any book, then I write 3 different novels, but each novel has its own story, but it might have different typesetting. It might have different, designs. It might have different layouts. It might have different forms and structures. So they're all the same thing, but different. But then when it comes to the audiobook, it's not a direct translation of that content to a degree. I can do lots of new things with it. I can add music. Now I'm thinking about actors. Actors bring interpretation. They bring performance. They bring questions. So you can think about loads of different opportunities and how to reframe this work or present it in a way that is different to the readers. Obviously, when you write, it's in your own voice, I would assume, but now you've got a different voice. So I find that really exciting. And I don't know if you're the same, but if I really love a book, then I'll get the audiobook, and I'll probably get the ebook as well, just because the different accesses to that content. For example, I really, really love Alan Partridge's Big Beacon and Nomad, and we need to talk about Alan, also Garth Marenghi's Terratome and Incarcerate, because they're hilarious to read. But when you listen to the audiobook, they're doing it in character. So now it's a whole new thing. It's a whole the nuance, the performance, and it's just fantastic. I really think that any new ways of looking at art or looking at things that you can change or adapt or put your own spin on it, I'm all up for. I think it's fantastic.
Oh, as you're saying that, yeah, absolutely. I'm nodding along because I'm thinking of the Ben Elton books, for example. I think there's a Starstruck, I think, is one of his. So again, you've read the book, but then all of a sudden, when you hear it as an audio book, there's people have got accents, and I think in that one in particular, it really brings it alive. It's almost like you say, it's a completely different way of doing it. I'm not saying it's better. I'm not saying it's worse. It's just different.
It's just different, and that can really inspire new things. And also, it can, I don't know, it might make you think negatively in some ways, or like, I wouldn't have done it like that. So, for example, when the first time I watched the Lord of the Rings films, like some of the character names, like, that's how they're pronouncing it. I've always said it the classic other way.
Harry Potter. It's Hermione, is it? Because you had all these kids reading it, just absolutely couldn't say that.
I can't get on board with this film. They're saying it wrong. But it's nice to I think it is nice to see these differences and see these kind of interpretations. And
it's really strange, isn't it? Because all of the Grace books are coming onto TV now, and I've listened to most of those, the Roy Grace books, and then all of a sudden it's like, she doesn't look like that. Exactly that. Because in my head, it's like, no, that's not who Bella is. It's really strange. In a way, I don't know. I feel like in some ways that's the beauty of a book, because I can visualize what, and that's right. For me, I visualize what I'm seeing, and obviously you've written it as the author, therefore you've got an idea in your head of what this person looks like, which may be different from mine, but that's not a problem. So in some ways, that's the advantage of a book over a film. Does that?
Yes, absolutely. It obviously leaves a lot to your imagination. It depends on the writer. I tend not to. I'm very descriptive of scenes and environments. I'm not particularly descriptive of people.
Right.
I don't think off the top of my head, because I'd like people to be able to project themselves or what they want or what they see, or however they want it to be for them. And then also it leaves the door wide open for casting in movies and stuff like that. I'm thinking ahead to the movies and everything like that. Are you
tempted to do that, Graham?
I would. I mean, that would be the dream, would be to become incredibly successful, flog my books to movie studios, become a producer on those, adapt the screenplay, and be on set. It would be amazing as the writer. That'd be great, because I wouldn't have much to do, so I'm not going to get shouted at by people. Just to be on set and see like these incredible creations of mine come to life. That would be an absolute dream.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's strange. In our world, the absolute dream is probably you've come up with a new training model. You've come up with something like that. It's going down an absolute treat, and you're asked to do a TED talk about it. It's that's our version or my version of exactly what you just said.
Oscars. Yeah, we'll get there, man. If that's your vision, you can't not get there. You think about much like the end of a book or the end of a training module that you're creating. You have the vision, or you have the idea, and it's just working backwards from that idea and how you're going to execute it. What do I need to do to make it happen? How is it going to look like? Who's going to be watching it? How is it going to work? How do I get to that TED talk? What do I need to? What are the requirements? What's needed of me to do that? And let's go do it. I think if you take action, you'll get there.
I understand alongside writing that you're a very keen cook. We've already mentioned the Lego bit to a certain extent, but I also picked up a Cure fan. So the obvious question's got to be, will the Cure ever top the Head on the Door album, which is by far the best album they've ever made?
Oh, are we about to disagree? Are we about to?
I was trying to be as controversial. I love Head on the Door.
It is amazing. I'm Disintegration for me. I think.
Oh, okay.
I think actually the Cure generally are so good at opening tracks.
Yeah.
And I for some reason I maybe assumed that into my books. I like to start things off with a statement of intent, you know. And
Great.
100 Years, the opening track on Pornography, or Plain Song, the opening track on Disintegration. These grand statements of intent. This is what we're about. This is what we're doing. This is where you're going. Are you on board? If you are, great. If not, good luck. I like that.
Yeah,
I like the ballsiness of it, you know?
Yeah, no, and there's definitely a skill to that, isn't there? Of ordering an album, if that makes sense. You know, it's not like there are 10 tracks on here and we can put them in order we like. The Cure are very good at doing exactly that, taking you on a bit of a journey across that whole album. I love that. We could talk about the Cure for hours as well. There you go. I did take my wife to see, she wasn't my wife at the time, but she is now. So I remember saying, "Oh, the Cure." Sure, I love the Cure and all of their stuff. And I think it was in, I'm going to say Hyde Park. It was one of the London parks anyway. It was one of the open air ones.
I think I was there.
And you had that terrible moment where Robert Smith came out and said, right, well, this show's going to be for all of the hardcore Cure fans. Lots of B-sides. And you can see everyone just glaze over and go, oh, good. I was in my element. She sat there saying, you're going to play what I know in a minute. I said, oh, you'll be all right. It's that classic. I hope you like our new direction. You think,
yes. No, it's the old Simpsons quote where they shout out, "No talking, no new stuff, just play the hits."
It's exactly that. Yeah, you go. Ironically, I'm going to see Populi itself in Brighton in a few weeks, and nice. I think they said the headline is all killers, no fillers, and I'm thinking we know exactly what we're getting. There you go. That's a. You go knowing that. Right, so anyway, we could talk about indie music forever. So most importantly, recommend a book to us. Recommend a book or a podcast we should be looking at. God, I mean, it's on a plate for you.
Other than this podcast.
Oh wow, yeah.
Well, I don't need to recommend. I recommend that they recommend it to other people. And I won't shamelessly plug my own podcast. It's hard to look past Adam Buxton, as he's the king of podcasts. He's so good. I don't know if he needs a recommendation though. He's probably got millions and millions of people listening to
yes, quite possibly.
I don't really know any unseen or unheard podcasts or ones lurking around in the fringes. I probably should. But okay, go to Adam Buxton, give him another view. Take away a view from a struggling podcast and give it to Adam Buxton. He needs them.
Do you know what I'd love to do, and we'll leave it a few months, but I'd love for you and I to have a conversation about how you go on the journey to set up a podcast and how you get on there and all of the rest of it. I'd love to do that because there are people who want to dip their toe in this thing, and it's nowhere near as difficult as you think. So maybe you and I can arrange diaries at some point and look at that.
Yes,
so I have a final question for you, and I always ask the same people. What's the ultimate weekend look like for you?
The ultimate weekend. Well, I was thinking about this. Let's stop short of, when we say ultimate, let's stop short of things like I'm in cataclysmic love with Natalie Imbruglia and we've got a private yacht. Okay, we'll forget that. Like ultimate, the way I was thinking about it, it's not too far off from the ones I have at the minute, which is quite a nice thing to realise when I was thinking about it. So it didn't involve a lot of cooking, cinema trips, some cocktails, a lot of movies, maybe some Lego, lovely weather, walk around the parks, see my friends. Nothing too grandiose. I think in the ultimate version, maybe I've scaled up things. The kitchen I'm cooking in is bigger. The parks are nicer. The films are better. All those kind of things. But scale it back down to the essence, and I'm pretty much doing it at the minute. Isn't that nice? Well, it is for me.
That's as good as it gets, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, to realise that
literally living the dream.
Literally living your own dream. It's nice.
Brilliant,
I sound
fantastic.
so smug, don't I?
No,
nice.
You don't. No,
nice.
No, you absolutely don't. Because as you're saying that, I'm thinking mine would be something like go for a run, come home, have some nice breakfast with the wife, maybe go and, we're going to take in some football later on, and then what we're going to do is go out in the evening. And I've just described what I do most weekends.
Yeah.
So
nice.
How good is that? Fantastic.
Yeah.
Very quick time for, you said you're not going to plug your own podcast, but if people do want to catch up with you, look at your work,
sure.
pick up on some of your books, where's the best way for them to contact you?
Just head to TheNeverPress.com for the website, TheNeverPress, one word. If you're interested in the podcast, it's a creative podcast about racehorses and movies. It's called Racehorse Movies. Basically, my friend and I select racehorses from the Racing Post, and the names of those racehorses we then pitch entire movies from. So the racehorse name is the title of the movie. We come up with the film, we cast it XYZ. So that's on Spotify, Acast, all the major platforms. Racehorse Movies.
That sounds excellent. I mean, talk about improv. There you go.
Yes,
think on your feet.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And as I say, if you're up for it, I'd love to do a follow-up.
Yes, 100%. I mean, I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been a really lovely... I was thinking it was going to be a lovely way to end the week, and it really has been. And so, yes, anytime you want me back, I am happy to... If you and your listeners want it, I'm happy to come back. It'd be lovely.
Well, they get what they're given.
They will get what they're given, yes. And it's going to be me.
Fantastic. I'll see you on the other side. Well, that's a wrap for another show. If you've enjoyed the chat today, please follow us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your shows. If you want to find out more about how People Unboxed is helping learners stop forgetting, check out our AI-powered bite-sized micro-learning app, BentoBot, at bentobot.com. Until next time, take care of yourselves.